The fall of Caracas. When the world watches capitals shake, it's not just buildings that fall. It's trust, families, futures, and the fragile peace between nations. For years, the United States had watched Venezuela's collapse. Economic devastation. Humanitarian crisis. Millions fleeing across borders. And at the center of it all, President Nicolas Maduro, accused of transforming his country into a narco-state. By late 2025, U.S. intelligence had gathered what they called actionable evidence, linking Maduro's regime directly to international cocaine trafficking networks moving thousands of kilograms through the Caribbean and into American cities. The decision was made at the highest levels. This wouldn't be sanctions. This wouldn't be diplomacy. This would be direct action. The mission was given a name that left no room for ambiguity: Operation Absolute Resolve. For 72 hours, elite forces rehearsed every detail. Delta Force, Navy SEALs, CIA paramilitary officers. The target, Fuerte Tayuna, Maduro's fortified military compound in the heart of Caracas. The objective, capture the president alive and extract him to face U.S. federal charges. January 3, 2026. The operation begins. At 2:47 a.m. local time, the Armada crossed into Venezuelan airspace. No warnings. No negotiations. 23 aircraft, strike fighters, electronic warfare planes, and transport helicopters carrying assault teams. Venezuelan air defenses detected the incursion immediately. But detection and response are two different things. By the time alarm bells rang across military installations, the first missiles were already in the air. Precision strikes disabled Venezuela's air defenses within 4 minutes. Command and control centers went dark. Communication towers crumbled. The Venezuelan military, already weakened by years of economic collapse, found itself blind and defenseless. For the people of Caracas, waking to the sound of explosions, this wasn't liberation. This was terror. They didn't know who was attacking. They didn't know why. They only knew their city was burning. The primary target, Fuerte Tayuna, the nerve center of Maduro's power. Intelligence indicated he was inside, along with his wife Cilia Flores, top military commanders, and his Cuban security detail. 24 Venezuelan security officers would die defending that compound. Some were career soldiers. Some were barely 20 years old. They fought knowing they were outmatched, outgunned, and alone. At 3:14 a.m. U.S. forces breached Maduro's inner sanctuary. The president and his wife were secured. Within minutes, they were on a helicopter heading toward the coast. The whole operation, from first strike to extraction, lasted 27 minutes. But as dawn broke over Caracas, the scope of the operation became clear. This wasn't just a surgical strike. Multiple targets across the capital had been hit: military bases, intelligence facilities, communications towers. The Venezuelan government had been decapitated in a single night. In Havana, Cuba mourned 32 of its own. Military personnel who had been stationed in Venezuela as part of Maduro's security detail. They died far from home, caught in an operation they never saw coming. These weren't high-ranking officials or hardened operatives. Many were young men sent to Caracas as part of Cuba's long-standing support for the Venezuelan government. Their families learned of their deaths through state television broadcasts. For the families of the 24 Venezuelan security officers killed, grief mixed with confusion and anger. Were their sons and husbands heroes or victims? Did they die defending their country or defending a regime the world called criminal? Some U.S. intelligence assessments put the total death toll, including civilians caught in crossfire or struck by debris, at approximately 75 people. The actual number may never be known with certainty. Each number in casualty reports represents a universe destroyed. A father who won't walk his daughter down the aisle. A son who won't care for aging parents. A wife who will sleep alone for the rest of her life. With Maduro gone, Venezuela descended into a dangerous vacuum. Armed colectivos, civilian militias loyal to the former president, now patrolled neighborhoods, uncertain of their future but determined to maintain control. The military fractured. Some units stood down. Others prepared to resist any transitional government. Venezuelan citizens spoke their truth. One older woman said, "We didn't ask for this. We wanted change, yes, but not like this. Not with bombs." A young man added, "Maduro was terrible, but who comes next? The Americans? Another strongman? We've been here before. A shopkeeper lamented, "My store is destroyed. My livelihood gone. They tell me this was for freedom. What freedom? I have nothing now." 5 days after his capture, Nicolas Maduro stood before a federal judge in Manhattan. The surreal image, a former head of state in an American courtroom, dominated headlines worldwide. The charges: narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, weapons trafficking, using Venezuela's state apparatus to facilitate international drug cartels. If convicted on all counts, Maduro faced life in federal prison. For prosecutors, this was justice delayed but finally delivered. Evidence gathered over years, intercepted communications, financial records, testimony from defectors, all pointed to systematic drug trafficking at the highest levels of Venezuelan government. The prosecutor stated, "The defendant transformed an entire nation into a criminal enterprise, using state resources to flood American communities with poison while his own people starved." The defense attorney countered, "This trial is a farce. My client was kidnapped through an illegal military invasion. This court has no jurisdiction. This is not justice, it's imperialism with a gavel." The international response split predictably along geopolitical lines. U.S. allies called it a legitimate action against a narco-state. Others, Russia, China, much of Latin America, condemned it as a flagrant violation of sovereignty. Legal scholars debated for days. Does the fight against narco-terrorism justify military intervention? Can international drug trafficking negate sovereignty? And most troubling, if this becomes precedent, which country is next? Weeks after Operation Absolute Resolve, Venezuela remains a nation in transition. A caretaker government, backed by the Organization of American States, struggles to establish legitimacy. But the fundamental questions persist. Who truly pays the price? Always the vulnerable. The families who lost fathers, sons, brothers. The civilians whose homes became collateral damage. The Venezuelan people, facing yet another uncertain chapter in their nation's troubled history. What will become of Venezuela's people? This is the question military operations never adequately answer. Removing Maduro doesn't automatically restore democracy. It doesn't rebuild infrastructure destroyed by years of corruption and mismanagement. It doesn't heal a society fractured by ideology and violence. The day after the capture is when the hardest work begins. And that work, rebuilding trust, institutions, hope, takes not days or months but generations. And what will history remember? Perhaps the audacity, a sitting president captured in a nighttime raid. Perhaps the controversy, sovereignty violated in the name of justice. Perhaps the human cost, the 75 lives lost, the families destroyed, the nation left in chaos. Or perhaps history will remember this as a cautionary tale about the limits of military power. About the difference between removing a dictator and building a democracy. About the gap between intentions and consequences. Operations like Absolute Resolve force uncomfortable questions. Questions about means and ends. About who has the right to determine another nation's future. About whether capturing one man justifies the broader cost. There are no easy answers. Only trade-offs. Only consequences that must be honestly reckoned with. Only choices that history will judge not by their opening moves, but by everything that follows in the years to come. War isn't just tanks and bullets. It's broken families. It's nations on the brink. It's questions without answers. And in this storm over Caracas, the reckoning has only just begun. As of January 2026, Nicolas Maduro awaits trial in federal custody. Venezuela's transitional government remains unstable. The families of those killed continue to seek answers. And the world watches, wondering whose capital might shake next. For the 75 souls lost in the storm over Caracas, and the millions still searching for peace.